At dawn the earth was the color of tea, and the only sound on the plain was the low scrape of a hoe. Musa Diallo ran his hand over the furrow and felt the cool of a season that still remembered rain. The boundary stones at the edge of his plot stood like short, stubborn teeth, each one set by his father in seasons of drought and plenty, each one named in family stories. He tightened the faded cloth around his waist and breathed the morning in, a breath of habit, of ownership, of the ledger kept in calluses. The village road hummed awake. A donkey cart rattled past the fig tree that marked the old path to the well. Nothing in this morning suggested the gate that would shut on him by noon. The first sign was not a gavel or a gun, but a paper, cream and official, slipped under his door with a neat stamp that bit into the margin like frost. "A notice of reallocation," it said, with a parcel number that matched his stones and a clause that did not. He carried the page to the village office with his thumb pressed to the seal, as if heat could melt its certainty. The desk inside smelled of ink and dust. Behind the glass, a clerk studied his face with professional patience and pointed to another desk, then another, until his breath shortened and the morning's ease departed. Each door led to a gate, and each gate had a keeper. He learned the new word in the afternoon: corridor. A corridor of signatures, a corridor of approvals, a corridor where a man with a badge decided which door opened and how slow. The badge belonged to Registrar Cohn, a careful man with a dry smile and fingers that hovered over ledgers like a hawk's shadow over field mice. "Your father's title predates the cadastral digitization," Cohn said, eyes on a screen that reflected in his glasses a grid of deeds like a city of trapped light. Under the modernization decree, parcels without digital confirmation returned to the pool for public utility. Utility meant a road that no one had proposed, or maybe a development someone had. Musa felt his ribs gather around his heart. He brought his father's deed, an older paper with a blue ink thumbprint and 3 witnesses, written in elegant looping script. He laid it on the counter, the way a believer lays a prayer on the threshold of a shrine. Cohn did not touch it. "This is an artifact," he said, as if naming a fossil. "Beautiful, but we cannot anchor the present to it. The system requires a key. Your key is not formatted." The word formatted landed like a stone in a well without water. The gate clicked shut. A guard by the door, bored and sympathetic, shook his head in the rhythm of men who have seen this many times and cannot say it aloud. A corridor can be walked if you have a guide. At dusk, Musa found Awa, a junior clerk who still brought tea to her elders and read the subtext in the office's WhatsApp group with a heart that misbehaved in the presence of injustice. She took the deed in both hands, looked at the thumbprint, and saw a man's breath caught in blue. "They buried the old book," she whispered, glancing at the ceiling as if boards could record betrayal. "The ledger that bridges the past to the database. Without it, elders become undocumented. They built a door and hid the key. The corridor had a secret, and it had a keeper, and it had a price. By night, the village learned, news travels faster than water in a dry season. Radio spoke between cousin compounds, and the women's cooperative weighed the story like millet, measured, sifted, shared. Elder Binta, whose daughters ran the grain stall at the market, placed her palms on the table and gathered the room's attention without raising her voice. "If one ledger disappears," she said, "a second will follow. When you lose the names on paper, you lose the names on graves." Her ward stepped outside and took a place at the gate. The next morning, men in shirts too crisp for the heat walked the boundary stones, pointing at nothing with steel-tipped pens. They left boot prints, like signatures in the dry soil. Musa stood 10 paces away and watched his father's markers cast short shadows. He thought of breath. He thought of a door. He thought of the small cucumber plants he had started in the shade of an overturned basin and where they would live if the earth beneath them changed its name. When the men left, a folded note appeared in his pocket, sly and sour. "Come tonight?" it said. "There is a way. There is always a way when the official door has rusted shut and someone owns a private key." The way had a price that fit inside an envelope and a promise that fit inside a lie. "Regularization," the broker said, smiling in a courtyard that smelled of cigarettes and copier toner. "We can format your key." He tapped his phone like a drummer. Names scrolled. Awa, drawn by conscience and night, stood in the alley and listened to the word format roll over dignity like a cart over a fallen chicken. The broker's whisper ran on the same current as the registrar's decree. Only the voltage changed hands. Musa stared at the envelope as if it were a snake coiled in dry grass. He did not touch it. "If a gate is honest," he said softly, "it should open in daylight." Night closed around them, and the story tightened like a belt. Somewhere beyond the corridor, a leader whose mornings began with a ledger of complaints would soon read a line that did not look like the others. The week stretched thin and crackled. A grater clanged into town, iron teeth gnawing the shoulder of the road, and a red ribbon appeared on the edge of the plain where no one had dreamed of a boulevard. Men with clipboards now moved with the impatience of a clock running behind. Public utility, they said, and the phrase swallowed objections whole. The boundary stones lost their posture. One fell to a careless boot, tilting in a way that made Musa wince, as if a tooth had been knocked loose from a living mouth. He collected the stone, carried it to his courtyard, and set it on the table beside the deed, two wounded things keeping each other company. On the second day, the broker returned with confidence, greased, thin, and shiny. He spoke as if they were cousins. "The door will not open for a story from another century," he soothed, gesturing to the thumbprint like a relic. "But it will open for a receipt. Everything opens for a receipt." He showed a template on his phone. The emblem in the corner looked almost right, though counterfeit notes are near enough to confuse a tired eye. The amount was written in neat figures, and the line for signature was wide, a mouth waiting to speak falsity. "You pay," the broker said. "We format the key tonight, and by morning your parcel glows green on the dashboard." He smiled at the new word, dashboard. Awa pressed her back to the alley wall and listened until her heart decided to move. She stepped in. Her badge was plain cloth, her authority borrowed and bright with youth. "If you do this," she said to Musa, not looking at the broker, "you become a shadow in the system that already erased you. They will own you twice." The broker laughed in a way that turned the courtyard to stone. "Child," he said, "systems are doors for the strong. We sell ladders." Awa's eyes did not leave Musa's. "There is another door," she murmured. "Harder to find, but real." By evening, the grater carved a doubtful curve dangerously close to the beans. The women's cooperative stood along the line with their arms crossed and their sandals leaving semicircles in the dust. Elder Binta shouted once, not with anger, but with the register used to call cows across a flooded track. The driver cut the engine. Silence fell, heavy and full of waiting. On WhatsApp, the village group blinked with videos of the pause, of the sweating machine, of the stones like teeth on a dentist's tray. Someone tagged a name they usually said only under breath or under hope. "Tag Ibrahim," a nephew wrote, and the name left the group chat and entered the country's conversation. The leader, men called him Ibrahim in the markets and Sir in rooms where air conditioners made paper vibrate, read his brief every dawn. Complaints, metrics, edge cases, little crises that became big when ignored. On the third morning, a stack of messages wore the same shape. A farmer, a ledger, a gate. The aide who brought the file, Fatima, kept a separate notebook for patterns. She had drawn a small door in the margin by habit, a sketch she added whenever an office forgot why it existed. She laid the notebook and the complaint together. "They buried the bridge ledger," she said. "They're between the old and the new, and they built a market around the burial." Ibrahim turned the paper and tapped the margin where a clause had been underlined by a hand that cared about commas. The modernization decree that Registrar Kone had learned to pronounce like scripture did not mention burial. It mentioned integration. It mandated a transitional register and a joint verification board in every district to reconcile paper and pixels before reallocations. "Find me the board minutes," Ibrahim said quietly. Fatima nodded. She had already asked. The minutes did not exist in any meaningful way. There were attendance sheets with photocopied signatures that had drifted, letter by letter, toward fraud. The leader's breath went slow. He understood doors. He understood ledgers. He understood how quickly a system would forget its purpose if no one watched the hinge. That afternoon, as the grater idled and the boundary stones cast small, defiant shadows, a white pickup arrived without sirens. Two men stepped out without entourage, the heat painting dark maps under their arms. Fatima had come with them, her notebook tucked under her elbow like a shield. Awa met them by the fig tree. Her breath came quick, not with fear but with relief, spun into urgency. Musa followed, carrying the deed in a cloth wrap as if it were a newborn. The pickup's door made a clean, honest slam. The broker, watching from beneath a doorway that sold both sweets and shortcuts, went still. Fatima listened first. She placed the deed beside the notice and studied their edges as if paper could confess. She asked no questions that implied guilt. She asked questions that sought sequence. "When was the digitization announced?" she asked Awa. "Where is the transitional ledger stored? Who has the key?" Awa's eyes flicked. She knew the answer that costs careers. "A registrar cone keeps it in a locked drawer," she said, unindexed, unscanned. He says the file numbers are wrong, or the witnesses are dead, or the stamps are from a previous seal. Then he delays until the parcel is marked silent, and the system returns it to the pool. The word silent did not belong next to land, but there it was, printed in gray on the screen of a city office that had never touched these stones. The grader's driver, a young man with a cousin among the cooperative, climbed down and stood at the edge of the conversation. "Well, we follow the red line," he said, almost apologetic. "They draw, we drive." Fatima nodded. "You are not the gate," she answered. "You are the road." She sent a message that did not need drama to command obedience. Pause works here until verification. And like that, a small breath returned to the field, and the machine's engine ticked itself cool. The pause was not enough, but it was a beginning, like a hand on a door before the turn of a key. The pickup took Musa, Awa, and Elder Binta to the district capital by late afternoon, the fields giving way to concrete that always forgot the dirt that fed it. The land registry sat in a low building whose paint had learned to peel in ribbons. Above the entrance, a sign promised service to citizen in blue letters that had sunburned to gray. Inside, the air whispered with old fans. A guard in a faded uniform tapped a ledger as if it were a drum, tick, 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 asking no question and allowing them to pass when Fatima showed her badge and the clean authority that came with it. Doors watched them. Hinges read the posture of justice as surely as men did. Registrar Cohn received them in an office arranged like certainty. A framed certificate sat above his head, the glass reflecting the window bars. Behind him, the digitization dashboard glowed. Parcels were rendered as a mosaic of green, yellow, and gray tiles. Green meant confirmed. Yellow meant pending. Gray meant silent. He did not look up when they entered. He finished typing a line into a form with precision that bordered on caress. When he raised his eyes, they were alert in the way of hunters not of game, but of excuses. Fatima placed the deed on the desk. Ibrahim was on the phone, not voice, but text. He preferred a record. She had a single line from him. "Find the hinge and oil it." "This is a sentimental document," Cohn said, not unkindly. "It reminds us of our roots. But the law asks us to plant in new soil." He gestured to the dashboard. "We have moved almost 60% of parcels into clarity." He let the number sit, a stone in a shallow pan that sounded heavy. Fatima did not step around the claim. She stood on it. The decree mandated a transitional reconciliation register and a joint board to meet weekly until legacy titles were integrated. "Where is the register? Where are the minutes?" Cohn's eyes flicked, and that flicker betrayed a seam in the suit. He reached into a drawer and placed a thin binder on the table as light as a lie. The tabs were labeled with months. Half the pages were blank. The minutes read like lists of names detached from deliberation. Attendance was perfect. Decisions were absent. Awa spoke, voice steady. "The ledger isn't here." It was both accusation and lament. Cohn smiled, weary granduncle to a child who has discovered adult hypocrisy. "We had a flood last season. Some boxes were damaged. The priority was the future, not nostalgia. We cannot wait forever for ghosts to approve what is alive." On the wall, a photograph showed him standing with a minister. The minister's face had the warmth of a man already gone. Fatima opened her notebook. "Names who sought verification last quarter," she said. 47. "Denied or delayed, 41. Of those, 23 parcels are now reassigned for public utility in projects that share a contractor." She did not raise her voice. She did not say corruption. She did not say kickback. She said sequence that Cohn was a gate, but he was not a cartoon. He believed in order, and in the small, private barter that keeps dusty offices functioning when budgets are ghosts. He had learned the script so well he no longer saw the stage. He spread his hands. "We aim for speed. The dashboard compels it. Gray tiles make headlines. Green tiles quiet them. Old deeds slow the river." Fatima nodded, as if considering a recipe. "Speed without memory is amnesia," she said. "You are turning breath into silence. The law gave you a bridge. You buried it." The door opened, and the room shifted. Ibrahim did not enter. He sent his line across the distance, and it arrived in the guard's hand, a printed directive with an unadorned signature. It ordered the immediate unsealing of the Transitional Reconciliation Register, its digitization within 72 hours, and the temporary suspension of reallocation actions on parcels with legacy claims until a verification audit concluded. It mandated the joint board convene within 24 hours, with citizen observers from recognized cooperatives. It named 3 indicators to hang above the registry counter by tomorrow noon. Door-to-help minutes, legacy claims verified, denials reversed. It designated a complaint channel. USSD code, WhatsApp number, physical box, and a 72-hour SLA. It banned facilitation commissions and committed a budgetary line for registry operations to replace them. It sounded simple. That was its power. Cohn read the directive as if reading his own diagnosis. He understood the weight of signatures and the speed of paper when its edges were sharp. He also understood survival. "Oh, we lack scanners," he said, the last barricade of men who have run out of maize. Fatima gestured to the hallway. 2 boxes waited, modest but new. She had requisitioned them last week for another district. She had diverted them without apology. "We will scan until the fans stutter," she said, "and then we will open the windows and scan more." The guard placed the directive on the wall where the sun could read it. Awa exhaled a breath that had waited in her chest for months. Musa watched the door swing fully open, not by charm but by law. Intervention in our stories is not thunder. It is a pencil drawing a line that others can follow and a hand pushing the pencil into use. Fatima stepped to the counter and asked for the box labeled Legacy Titles, pre-digital. The clerk hesitated and then, seeing the room had changed, brought it. Dust rose and settled like a small private winter. Blue thumbprints gleamed through thin paper like constellations. Awa set a tray beside the scanner. Each deed entered the light and emerged with a new name, a string of numbers that meant alive in the language of servers. Outside, the city's sound worked on as always. Buses, vendors, a radio playing a love song that knew nothing of decrees. The real music was in the low hum of a policy being lived. Opening a door reveals not only a room, but the corridor behind it. With the register unsealed and the minutes demanded, the gaps widened into maps. Fatima's team was not an army. It was 3 analysts with clean eyes, a lawyer who believed in commas, and a driver who knew which photocopy shops kept back channels. They started with the anomalies, parcels marked silent just before reallocation. The pattern repeated with the confidence of habit. A legacy claim enters. A delay letter issues citing missing digital confirmation. The joint board defers for lack of quorum. The parcel sits gray for 90 days. A notice of reallocation arrives, naming public utility. Within weeks, a private contractor posts a guarded fence on the earth itself. The evidence did not shout. It murmured from WhatsApp chats where emojis softened intent. In one thread, a district officer texted a broker a map pin with a caption that read, "Quiet one, no airs loud," followed by a wink. In another, a clerk sent a spreadsheet titled Format Keys, listing parcel numbers and euphemisms for fees. Names were absent. Amounts were present. A voice note from a meeting hummed with fans and euphemistic praise for partners who accelerate development. The law had been respected in form and inverted in spirit. The hinge had not broken. It had been held at the wrong angle. Registrar Cohn did not lead the scheme, but he did not stop it. His office had become a slow river around which rocks learned where to rest. The contractor's representative had a laminated card that opened every door quieter than a bribe. It opened via invitation. Fatima's lawyer, a man named Isa, who smiled only when commas aligned, pulled out the statute and placed it beside the minutes that had not been written. The joint board's quorum requirement was 3. For 6 consecutive weeks, attendance log said 4. Yet every contentious claim had been deferred for lack of quorum. And this was theater, and bad theater at that. They moved to the archive room, where boxes sat like mute jurors. Awa guided them to the shelf where the bridge ledger should have lived all along. It had been relocated to a back corner and mislabeled as non-operational records. On the cover, an old stain the color of tea had bled through. Inside, pages held not ghost stories but living titles. Women who had accepted land instead of dowry. Veterans whose reward was soil rather than metal. Widows whose sons worked in cities and sent money home to keep stones upright. Fatima's team photographed, scanned, indexed. Names re-entered the light. Exposure requires light, but also a lens. Fatima called the public radio and asked for a slot on the weekly Service Lines broadcast, a program that tended to keep state and citizen in one conversation for half an hour on Saturdays. She arrived with calm and numbers. She did not say scandal. She said process. "We've reactivated the transitional register," she told the host, and thousands of kitchens paused their chopping. "Legacy titles will be verified within 14 days. We've posted the metrics at every registry counter. Door-to-help minutes, legacy claims verified, denials reversed. They update daily. If your case stalls past 72 hours without reason, dial the USSD code or send a WhatsApp message. You'll receive a ticket number and a human will call you back." The host tried to pivot to villains. Fatima pivoted to hinges. "When a door swings the right way," she said, "you don't ask who swung it wrong. You oil it so it stays honest." The contractor, sensing its advantage evaporate, sent a statement heavy with public utility and light on details. Social media carried the text in pretty fonts. It failed to mention the names in the bridge ledger. It failed to mention that the New Roads line could tilt 5 degrees and save the beans without changing the budget. ISA drafted a formal notice to the contractor attaching the reinvigorated decree. All works touching parcels with legacy claims are paused pending verification, it read. Works resumed without clearance will be considered encroachment. The word encroachment caused the contractor's lawyer to breathe in sharply. Breaths became part of the record. The day the dashboard went live at the registry, the room changed temperature. Above the counter, a modest screen displayed 3 numbers in simple white font over a blue field. Door to help minutes, 18. Legacy claims, verified. Today, 12. Denials reversed. This week, 7. A small line chart walked across the bottom like a patient ant. Up when the minutes fell, down when they rose. The security guard, who had always known who suffered and who sailed through, watched the numbers as if they were weather. Citizens stood straighter in the queue. The broker stopped coming inside and took his whispers to the courtyard, where sun ruins secrets. Exposure is not only media and screens, it is also the quietly catastrophic email that crosses a minister's desk. Fatima sent one with attachments that did not require adjectives. Contracts, pins, deferred minutes. She did not propose a headline. She proposed an audit protocol. Random sampling of gray to green conversions, verification calls to claimants recorded for quality, quarterly external observer seats, rotating among cooperatives and bar associations. She proposed that all registry offices adopt the same 3 metrics in the same format, posted above the counter, photographed daily, and sent to a central board where anomalies blinked like broken bulbs. She proposed that promotions in the registry service incorporate a simple line, percentage of legacy verifications completed. She proposed habit as the enemy of harm. By sunset, the ledger had a breath again. Moose's deed, scanned and assigned a digital twin, sat on the screen beside his name, the blue thumbprint shining as if a star had been hired to guard it. The joint board, convened at last, read the documents aloud. Hawa sat among them as staff, her hands still smelling faintly of toner. Elder Binta watched from the observer's bench, a quiet rock in a room learning a new tide. The motion to reverse the reallocation passed. More striking, the motion to adjust the roads line by 5 degrees passed without drama. Cohn signed both with a pen he had not used for courage in years. Cameras were unnecessary. The sound of pens on paper sufficed. Outside, the broker slipped into a day where he would need to learn honest work or find another door to haunt. The story did not end with a signature. It began there. The reform had to walk from paper to habit, from a morning announcement to an afternoon reflex. Ibrahim named the rule and did not adorn it. A bridge before build. It meant no public work could touch a contested plot until the bridge ledger, the reconciliation between legacy paper and digital record, was checked, scanned, and posted. It sounded obvious enough to embarrass any office that had forgotten it. The second line of the rule was the oxygen. Treat first, bill never at the gate. It required registry offices to help citizens assemble missing testimony before asking for any fees. Fees would be charged, but not at the door, and never to open it. A small budget line appeared like a lifeline in the fiscal document, dull as most lifelines are on paper. It funded scanners, clerks for the verification desk, and a monthly stipend to cover the cost of witness transport and notarization for elders. The perverse incentives were banned with language that left little air around them. No percentage-based facilitation, no express files, no broker commissions. In their place, registry staff were offered measured pride, a quarterly posting of offices that kept door to help minutes under 30, verified most legacy claims within 14 days, and had the fewest reversals on appeal. Pride is a clean fuel when not mixed with vanity. The board published performance not to shame, but to show what good looks like. Training arrived on a Tuesday with thermoses of tea and a handout designed for clarity, not performance. At the top, a drawing of a door with 3 arrows. Listen, verify, log. The drill was embarrassingly simple. A citizen arrives. The guard or first clerk notes arrival time and prints a small ticket like a bus stub. The clock starts. The clerk listens first and resists any reflex to correct. The clerk then checks the bridge ledger index, scans any legacy document in front of the citizen, and logs the claim. If witnesses are required, the office schedules a joint verification visit within 3 days, not weeks. A small motorcycle fund covers field movement. At every step, the citizen receives a ticket number and a brief SMS restating what happened. Complaints go to the USSD code or WhatsApp with the ticket. And the system obliges a response within the 72-hour SLA. The training made no mention of stars or morals. It taught a sequence. People remember sequences better than sermons. Fatima insisted on a public dashboard that was not a toy. The metrics were few. Door to help minutes. Legacy claims verified. Denials reversed. The board above the counter updated in near real time, pulled from the registry app that recorded each step. A weekly bar on the right marked offices meeting the 30-minute standard. The color changed on Friday if an office fell below for 2 weeks running. Citizens loved the simplicity. Clerks loved the mercy of explicitness. The broker economy hated it. Whispers lost their rate when sunlight priced them out. Audits were not sharp only at the top. They were steady at the base. A rotating panel of 3 citizen observers attended the joint board weekly session, not to accuse, but to watch. Their only power was to write down what they saw and post it on a bulletin board at the market and send it to the central office. It was enough. Isa designed a random callback script for claimants. Did you receive a ticket? Did anyone ask for a fee before service? How many days until your verification visit? The answers did not require drama. They required numbers. Fatima's team read them like weather. When a storm gathered, they did not scold clouds. They moved buckets. The enforcement teeth were careful, not performative. A clerk caught selling express service did not become a headline. He met a disciplinary board that knew the policy and wrote sanctions with scaled seriousness. A broker who forged receipts met the criminal code, but the office did not make a circus of it. They made a case. Ibrahim's ethic was breath before billing and justice before theater. He required monthly culture checks, short standing meetings in each registry where staff reflected on what their hands had done right and wrong. The minutes of those meetings were posted on the intranet, readable by any office. It created a quiet competition in honesty. On the ground, the reform made small, visible changes that mattered. At the registry door, the guard who used to tap his ledger in boredom now wrote in it with purpose. He stamped tickets that gave citizens a number, not as a cue, but as a witness. He greeted people by name, not as a favor, but as a function. Awa ran the verification desk like a nurse triaging a clinic, calm, kind, firm. She called elders by title. She took the thumbprints gently, pressing for enough ink and not too much. Musa watched others hand over their fragile papers without the tremor he had felt. He watched the scanner swallow them and send back not silence, but a ping. The ping was a sound of a door learning its job. The roads line, once a red threat, shifted on the map like a river corrected by a careful engineer. 5 degrees made room for beans and dignity. The grader returned, its engine humming a new song, and the driver, who had come to the culture check and listened, lifted his hand to the women's cooperative before lowering the blade. Elder Binta stood at the edge with a thermos of sweet tea and handed cups to the crew at midday without argument in the steam. The reform was not a miracle. It was work, but work that repeated with enough honesty becomes culture, and culture is what saves you when no one watches. The season turned. The beans climbed their lines and bowed under small, earnest weight. Moose's boundary stones, reseated and set true, leaned together like elders in conversation. He had learned to check his parcel on the registry app the way he checked the sky, morning glance, small nod. The screen showed his name, the blue ghost of his father's thumbprint digitized into a calm icon, the word verified in a green square that no longer required explanation. He did not visit the office much anymore. Doors are best admired for their quiet when they work. He left a sack of millet for Awa once and a note for Fatima that read only, "Your pencil fixed the hinge." In the registry, boredom of a good system settled in like shade at noon. The guard stamped tickets and joked about the door-to-help minutes as if it were the soccer score. 18 today, he'd say, tapping the board with pride, and someone would answer, "Let's beat the central office by 2. The complaints channel did not ring much, and when it did, it was treated like a fire alarm, not a nuisance. The joint board meetings had observers who sat and took notes and yawned sometimes, not because they didn't care, but because, in the absence of crisis, care looks like patience. Cohn, who had learned to lift the bridge ledger without flinching, retired quietly a year later. He left a note in his drawer that said, "I learned the angle of the hinge too late." It was not absolution. It was a human line. Other offices copied without ceremony. The school registrar installed a small screen with enroll-to-seat minutes and a window labeled questions, not fees. The health clinic borrowed the door ticket idea and stitched it to triage. The transit office put the USSD complaint code on the back of bus passes. No speeches marked these adoptions. A photo or two appeared on the intranet with captions that read like recipes. "Here's how we stuck the board to the wall without it falling. Here's how we printed tickets when the roll jammed." Culture diffused not by decree, but by usefulness. Someone in a far district designed a cardboard frame for the metrics board that made the numbers look like a game scoreboard, and attendances went up at the Friday culture checks because people wanted to see their line climb. Ibrahim walked through these rooms sometimes without photographers. He put his palm on doors to feel if the wood had learned the right memory. He read the dashboards the way a farmer reads clouds, looking for the shifts that matter. He asked questions with verbs. Did we call back? Did we scan? Did we verify? He trusted Fatima to hear the texture of deception when it returned, dressed in new words. She kept her notebook open to a page where she had drawn a door and written the 3 arrows beneath it. She had started adding a 4th arrow, faint and tentative. Teach. When habit sets, you teach less. But you keep the chalk at hand. Moose's son, who had left for the city and returned because the earth calls you by your tiny childhood name, planted trees along the road where the grader had once threatened. He laughed at the idea of a dashboard, and then, when he needed to register his small cooperative for water rights, he checked the app for door-to-help minutes and picked the morning when they were low. He returned before lunch, papers in order, no story to tell. Later, at a wedding, someone asked him how things were at the registry. He shrugged with a smile that contained no bitterness. You go, he said. They listen, they check the ledger, they scan, you get a message, you go home. It was the boredom of a good system. It was what his father had needed years before and what his children would expect without awe. The broker opened a shop that fixed phones. He had nimble hands that had always been worthy of honest work. They learned to solder rather than to whisper. Awa got promoted, not with a ceremony, but with a heavier key ring and the right to sign the verification log. She still brought tea. She still said please and thank you. Isa's commas kept the decrees honest. Elder Binta kept bringing thermoses to work sites where red lines now bent before beans. Cone sent a quiet gift to the office on his last day. A new hinge for the archive door, wrapped in brown paper with a single sentence. Doors should last. The last image is as unremarkable as you want a republic to be. A child runs his hand along the smooth frame of the registry door while his mother argues gently with a clerk about how to spell a name. The board above hums its 3 numbers. The fan whispers. A scanner pings. A ticket prints and curls. Outside, a farmer walks past with dust in the hem of his boo-boo and a calm face. He breathes, then steps, then breathes again. The gate has learned its job. The ledger has learned to speak. The door remembers the right way to swing. And in that memory, justice no longer needs a hero every morning. It simply needs to be maintained. Thank you for spending time with this story. If it moved you, or sparked a thought you want to pass on, help it reach one more person. And if you like the video, then like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps these investigations alive and the doors of justice open.